Hello, and welcome to Learn It from a Layman. My name is Carl Christensen. I'm joined tonight by Matt, and we have a special guest joining the podcast for the first time, Michelle Christensen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're super excited that Michelle's able to join. Michelle, I don't think you can hide relationship here. We share the same last name, so I
And you look the
we're actually
same.
right away. We're Yeah. So, Michelle, thanks for coming on. Michelle's background here is tonight we're going to be talking about the basics of art and being an entrepreneur. And Michelle has a lot of experience in this area. So, Michelle's going to be able to teach us a little bit about designer questions and being business questions and all of that. Michelle, you want to give us a little background about? I knew you first as an artist. So, kind of what took you from art and to where you are now?
So I have always been interested in art since I was very small, and I always kind of aspired to be, an artist and creative in some way. But I studied illustration at BYU, and I got my BFA in illustration, and then I started working at a newspaper as an in-house illustrator, and I was really passionate about, telling stories with my drawings, and so that was kind of a perfect job to, start out, because I would get my illustrations published every week through Deseret News, and that was really great. And then I actually quit that job because they were laying off of like 60, I think it was like 60% of their staff. This was like 2009. So I booked a one-way ticket to Paris, and I was like, I've always wanted to live in Paris. I took French throughout high school and middle school, and I just was, like, I'm gonna go and live there for a while. And so it was very spontaneous, and I don't think I planned it super well, but and then I was like, okay, now I need to figure things out, where I'm going to stay. And there was an artist out there, a Russian artist actually, who, took apprentices or artist assistants, and so I was like, I contacted him, and I said, hey, can I come, work for you? And he said, sure. You can do I have a commune, you can live here and work for me. And I was like, okay. So I made, I had a few contacts out there that I, stayed with when I first went out there. And the artist ended up being a little sketch. And so I visited the commune. It ended up being this really weird ramshackle thing behind a bunch of French buildings. And basically he showed this painting he was working on. It was really beautiful and really kind of weird, but you could tell he was good at painting, but then he was like, what happens here stays here. And he's like, your morals and your I can't remember your morals at the door, and pick them up when you leave. And so I was like, I don't know what that means. So, decided not to do that. I had a really bad feeling about that.
Yeah, you made it out alive, Michelle.
So I didn't do it, and I ended up just getting a part-time nanny job and staying there just for a few more months before I came back. But it was a really pivotal moment for me in my the direction that my art would go, because there was an area of Paris that I loved, Belleville, and it was an arrondissement, and it's just it was just so it's a little bit, I don't know, I don't think it's very much like this anymore. I think it's become quite gentrified actually, but when I was there, it was felt super international, and it had a lot of Asian cultures and African cultures, and that were very apparent in the storefronts. And I remember going into this one Chinese store, and I couldn't remember the name, the one of the words for something. And so I used French and Chinese to speak with this lady, and she understood me. And I just thought that was so cool. And so,
It is pretty cool.
but yeah, just like, it felt very just neat, And so, I came back to this, and, I was like, I really, I became obsessed with Paris. I mean, I always had been, but like just wanting to go back. And so I ended up starting up my brand name, My Little Belleville. And so mainly because I just wanted like a little, because I loved it so much. I had such a good experience there. I wanted to kind of take that with me wherever I went. So, do you guys, I know this is kind of a long intro.
No, this is great. No,
this is far more fascinating than what we usually talk about.
Matt, though part of the podcast, isn't a huge fan of the podcast.
Anyway.
No. Yeah, I guess. Okay, this is great. So My Little Belleville, and is that so? You've already said you worked as an illustrator briefly, for Deseret News, getting your art published. But
Yes.
My Little Belleville, what did you start when you said you got your brand name? What were you starting with there?
So I started painting on ceramics. First of all, I found this special paint that you could actually like set in your oven, and so it would become like durable. And I began to just illustrate plates and like dishware and just like all of these different types of things that you kind of utilitarian objects, mostly ceramics. And it was just a fun medium and a fun surface to just draw on, and to paint on. And so and I would put French words and illustrations, and do kind of and I put Chinese characters, and just it was kind of just a very fun time for me to just explore and just experiment with all of these different ideas I had. So I started to sell at markets. I started putting stuff on Etsy, and that's when I started my Etsy store, and started putting ceramics on there, and they kind of took off. And so I found it really fun, and I kept going with it. And then I met my husband, and we got married, and I opened up a studio, that's where I started to again develop my style a little bit more. And it was in the Bamberger Mansion, which was the old mayor's governor's mansion. It's on 100 South, and it's a historical building. And it was like $200 a month to have a studio space. And I like ripped out this gross carpet in there and like painted the floor red, and just like it was just a cool space. It was very,
That's
very
fun.
So yeah, that's kind of where the brand started, and I started branching out from there and just doing a lot of different products from.
Oh, so I mean, you started describing the process, but how did you feel? I mean, because you started as an artist, as an illustrator, and then you said you started selling at markets, starting Etsy. Like, there's a lot more involved, right? In starting a brand and doing that. What was that process like for you? I mean, I guess was it natural? Did you feel like you wanted to do that, or you just wanted to do the art and have someone else sell it? I mean, how did that feel to you?
I felt so I really didn't know what I was doing, but I've always been good at selling. Like I would sell stuff on eBay all the time, and like I feel like I was good at selling things. I could market it well. I could write. I'm a good writer, so I could always write a good, some good content. And I also will be honest, like when I lived so I grew up in China, and I was obsessed with going to the markets there. So I will say I am a very good shopper too. And so I think I have a good eye as far as like what what sells. And so that I think helped me. But again, I didn't have a business background. I didn't have, so I will say also that at a market called Renegade in Chicago, I met the buyers from Anthropology, and they looked at my stuff and they're like, "Oh, this is great. Do you have a catalog that you could, send us?" And I was like, yeah, I have a catalog. And so I made one really quick and I sent it to them, and then they, bought a bunch of my ceramics. And at the time, I had been getting them printed locally, so I didn't have to like hand paint everything. But that was super exciting. At the time, looking back at that, I would have done a bunch of things differently, charged more for them for sure, and also would have been better about keeping in contact with them as far as like, oh, like, how are these selling? Like I wasn't very demonstrative as far as like that, because I felt kind of shy and intimidated at that point, because it was like probably a year into actually, doing these.
Right. I'd imagine that's a feeling that a lot of artists kind of have to feel when they're first starting being an entrepreneur, trying to do your own business, is a little bit of intimidation factor. That'd be pretty natural.
Yeah, I think it's hard for artists to price themselves appropriately. I think it's like, oh, this comes so naturally to me, or it's like so personal, like, oh, just have it for free, or just, like, yeah, I mean, I think it's good, and every artist goes through that. But at some point, you have to be like, okay, well, this is my living, and like I've invested time and money into learning, and I feel now I've gotten over that, thankfully.
Yeah. You've got. I've got, I guess, like one or two technical questions before we continue with your story and talk a little bit more about what my little Belleville became and what it is now. But just for the podcast is Learn It from a Layman, and I am the layman. So what's the difference between an artist and a designer, or is that like the same thing? And which one are you?
Yeah, I saw that question, and to be honest, I think I'm a little of both. Although I remember when so years later, after this Anthropology thing, I actually got a job working as a designer for Anthropology at their headquarters in Philly. And I was hired as a designer. And my manager, I remember her saying like, oh, you know what? Your brain is a little bit more like the textile team, which they were a bunch of artists, not so much designers. And designers, I would say, are more technical, more able to think of things, in measurements, and a little more analytical. And so I think I'm a wannabe. But I want to be, but I've learned to become a designer. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I think naturally I'm an artist, but I think I've also really, really enjoyed honing the skills of a designer. So like now I'm able to, because I've worked for other companies too, like Hallmark, and I worked for this baby shoe company called Freshly Picked, and I was a senior designer for them it was a short time, but with all of these different jobs I've had, I've really learned how to, make tech packs and, take a product like a backpack or like a pair of shoes or, a vase, and like just do like a very general shape, and then take artwork and place it on it, and, describe it in a way that factories and vendors can actually read it and understand and make it in a 3D form.
Okay.
I feel like an artist is someone who's like just not as organized. just more kind of like, oh, I have this idea, I'm just gonna like, just a little bit more abstract in there.
Sure.
Perhaps.
Okay. So that makes sense to me, and it also, like I said, I guess my next question then is going from an artist, Michelle, like where that you feel like that was like your natural place.
Mhm.
Going to trying to become a designer, trying to become an entrepreneur, that creative side of you, do you feel like that's hampered at all? Do you feel like you want more creative time, or what does that look like as you kind of toe that line between designer and entrepreneur and artist?
So I would say that I don't, like, a very small percentage of my time right now is devoted to designing because I am doing all of the other things that involve, like the logistical parts of running a business. Um, there's the orders, there's keeping up to date on my listings and my inventory and making sure that there it's all like running smoothly, and then I'm getting back to customers. And so but I've also been, I try to educate myself as far as like, you know, becoming a little business savvy, because I do think that I'm not, my greatest strength is obviously not business, but I've come to accept that. I'm like, okay, well, that's like, it's fine. I don't need to be, So, I mean, at some point I would like to hand it off to someone who is, maybe it has an MBA or, has that part down.
Right.
But I feel like, a lot of it I've learned along the way, and I've learned incrementally, and it hasn't been like an all of, like I feel like I do try my best to learn and grow as much as I can with, every aspect. And I also feel like I've learned to ask for help. And for example, I'm opening a store now in Salt Lake, and it's going to be at Trolley Square if there's anyone listening who wants to visit.
We've got some Utah listeners. Yeah, go visit. What? So it's the name of the store is My Little Belleville.
Yep, it's My Little Belleville. It's across from Rodizio Grill, so it's upstairs. And it looks like a little house, and it's really cute, in my opinion. The facade, anyway, it's really nice. It's really like a very cool outside. But yeah, so I don't remember. Anyway, all I'm saying is I think that I've had to ask for help, and I do have 2 employees now, well, 3 actually, and it's been really, really nice to hand off some of those things like packaging orders and, organizing inventory, that kind of stuff, to someone else. And so I can focus on the things I am good at. So I think that's something I've had to learn. And I kind of have had, I've had some really great mentors and people who've like been helping me along the way, so I'm still in the process of learning. I'm still in the process of, organizing it, making sure that it's being the most productive.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'd say asking for help is a big part of, I'm sure, growing from your basic skill set to what, the company that you've got. You've got to be able to, network and bring people in. So,
Yes, definitely.
yeah. Okay. I'm a software engineer now, Michelle, and I don't have a lot of creative time or really ability anymore. I feel like very much. So, would what is your creative process? I want to know a little bit about what, is it like you wake up at night and all of a sudden you're like, I know what, I've got to create this thing, or, what do you do?
So now with my like background working for Anthro, Hallmark, Freshly Picked, and also I did a lot of freelance too, years and years of freelance. Um, I feel like my process is a little bit more honed in now. I feel like I do a lot of research as to trends, and right now I do a lot of clothing and jumpsuits. Those are like my best sellers. And now I'm starting to kind of branch out into, garden, and I do, just more clothing items. But so my process is basically like, I think about the products I have that are like my best sellers. And then I try to either pair products with those or continue to design within the product that is doing well. So, like I have quite high priced items that, that sell well. And then I have, I do have a customer that is willing to pay, $200 for, a jumpsuit or like a painted piece of jewelry, or something like that. Or I have another customer that maybe their budget's like 20 or like $30, and then they can buy a t-shirt that I've designed, or a bag, or some gardening gloves. So I feel like I'm a little strategic in the way that I design now. So I do a lot of, kind of inspirational research. I love Pinterest. I go on there all the time and make little secret boards, for myself. And then I'll kind of, come up with ideas by just sketching, or I use a lot of ink, to, just sketch out things, sketch out ideas. And then I will also use my iPad I have, Procreate, and I'll use my little Apple Pencil to draw as well. And initially I'll, just come up with patterns that I like, for all over patterns for, my jumpsuits or bags, or and then some of my like t-shirts or sweatshirts, I'll just come up with, block, like a solid illustration for the front or back. And I'm still kind of getting used to like coming up with like full collections, because it's, for me, that's where the artistic part of me is. I'm not most like designer minded when it comes to that. I'm more like, oh, I love this and I love this and I love this, so I'm just gonna make all of it and will be my collection, and so it's kind of fun to do that. It's a bit
Right.
I feel like it does come together, but anyway, that's when it's really fun, when I can just,
Right.
start doing that. But that's kind of my
So
process.
yeah, so it sounds like your practical, pragmatic side realizes that there's a way to make a successful business, and you can use your your artistic skills in a way, but you got to hone in that way. You've got to like figure out what's going to sell, what's going to move, and then every once in a while you give yourself a little free rein as far as getting to do whatever you want to do.
Yes, yeah. Because I mean, I have, like I said, different customers. I have a customer who likes the weird like illustrations that I do. And so I can put that on a t-shirt, and usually it sells because it's like, they like it. And then I have a more sophisticated customer who, they like the weird illustrations, but they are more, they maybe want something that's like, a jumpsuit or a dress or something that's like more fitted, or just has a different kind of, aesthetic. So I've been figuring that out. It's fun.
Okay, nice. I just wanted to check with Matt. Matt, that's got to be your creative process as well, I believe, right?
I don't work in a field where we deal with creativity.
We
If
don't
it's
believe
new
in
and
creativity
different,
around
then
here.
we're afraid of it.
Well, it probably endanger lives, right?
Uh,
Yeah.
So, in all seriousness, there is a lot of inspiration and a lot of ideas that happen. It's quite a bit different, and a lot of it is grounded in, it's not necessarily like thinking outside of boxes or anything like that. It's knowing all of the boundaries of the box and how to operate within it.
Hmm.
So, and maybe you see some of that as well. I mean, with the research that you do in trends and what's likely to sell or be marketable. It's not quite it. I imagine that it's kind of like defining the boundaries of where you want to operate.
Yeah, I think so. I think it also is like, I mean, part of design is being a good designer, I think, is taking all of those kind of statistics and, those kind of more, I don't know, is it left side of the brain, right side, left side, where
The analytical, logical stuff.
yeah, where you like, you're like, okay, like you got to design into these categories and they need to be products that actually you have to kind of think like your customer too, so whether or not, I think part of working for a company that felt limiting to me is that I had to think more like that and less as to like, oh, I really like this design. I think it'll do so well. And like, or like, I think it'll be really strong. And, the buyers would drop a lot of stuff, like, in these certain companies, they'd be like, no, it's not going to sell. The customer doesn't like that. We have to do this, So it's not always so exciting as you might want it to be.
Right. Speaking of exciting, I want to know, what was your first big success? I mean, you've mentioned a couple different things in your life that seem to be big kind of turning points. But what was your first, for My Little Belleville? What was it that you feel like really started turning the needle? Started really drawing interest.
So I would say that big anthro order was a huge, huge deal because at the time I had just been selling to customers and in markets, and once they found my stuff and were wanting to buy it, I was like, oh, this is so awesome. It felt like really special, and like I had kind of, it just made me feel validated, like, oh, I've been working toward, like, I'm an artist, I'm doing this, and like, this big company likes my stuff, and it felt really good. I had also done some illustration work that was featured in a Forbes article. That was like my very, very first like huge, deal for me, as an illustrator. Was that
right out of college, or when was that?
It was about a year out of college, and I met up with this writer in New York when I was in New York City, just visiting, and she's like, oh, let's meet, I want to talk to you about this idea I have for a story. And so that was cool. And I remember being so scared and be like, okay, I'll do whatever you want. Because she's like, it's for Forbes, and I was like, okay, you just anyway. But
That's awesome. Okay, so you've said a couple marketing and networking as an artist have to be super important, right? What do you recommend? Like what shows? What worked for you? What do you see working?
So I feel like I joined the social media scene when it was very young, and so in that way I feel like I was able to get, because I have a good Pinterest following, I have a good Instagram following, and I feel like it was really important for me to just keep putting my art in front of my, an audience. And I don't think that's like a very natural thing for artists to want to do, because a lot of art is very personal, or it's like, you just don't want people to criticize it, And so I just remember being like, I don't feel this anymore because I don't care anymore. But like in the beginning, like, okay, I'm going to post this. Are people going to like it? Oh my gosh, no, posting it. And if I didn't get enough likes or whatever, I'd be like, oh, I'm just not good enough, just like, anyway. But I do think that it is hard to put your stuff out there. But quite, I was a very ambitious, maybe overly confident, like college, like college student and also post-college student, because I was like, I want to do this. I'm going to just, I guess I had a lot of chutzpah, and
That's a good thing.
I did, I did, you know, and because of that, I did fail a lot too. I remember taking this job. I was still in college, and this is before I knew how to do Photoshop. And this guy was like, I have this company that I need a logo for. I had never done a logo before. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. And like, he showed me, you know, he sent me a bunch of, you know, the stuff that he wanted me to do. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do and, like, terrible. I like tried to use like Photoshop or not even Photoshop. I think I used just some random thing to try to make it look digital. It was bad. It was so bad. And they're like, we're sorry, this is not going to work. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I've come a long, long way in that regard. But yeah, marketing. So sorry, it's a very long answer to your question, but
No, I think that what you said right there is super important, probably for a lot of artists or aspiring artists to hear, is that like it's like you'll fail sometimes, and that's okay. You just, you know, keep yourself going, like keep your confidence up, keep putting yourself out there.
yeah, I don't think I think when I failed, I would feel really bad. You know, I'm not going to say I didn't feel bad. Like I would just be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. But I would just try to kind of push through it and just be like, okay, it'll be fine. You know, I think it's, yeah, like you said, it's important to keep on going and just, you know, just forgive yourself. And, you know, like it's,
Lesson.
but
Nice.
yeah, I can say
Okay.
a lot about marketing, just but I would say making sure that you're seen on social media and also, you know, in person too. It's good to, if you don't know exactly what you want to focus on as an artist, I think it's good to just explore and try out different things. And I think eventually it works out because you start to focus on the things that you're good at and that you actually enjoy, you know?
Yeah, that's a nice insight.
I wanted to ask,
Okay.
you kind of started to touch on it when you talked about getting that whole left brain engaged. Are there aspects of formal like education that you found particularly valuable in your artistic entrepreneurship or that you wish you had had more of? And I think you've kind of hit or like, you know, obliquely touched on some of them, but I'm just wondering if there was anything specific or special where you look at it and think, I wish I'd had a class on that, or thank goodness I had a class on that.
Um, I would say, so I went to BYU. I do think the illustration program is excellent there. I actually I learned how to draw really well there, which was huge as far as, you know, making me, I think, a good artist as well as a good designer, because designers are usually excellent renderers. And it's very helpful to be able to draw, just sketch out something, an idea, or, um, anyways, but so that's one thing I feel like was great. They did have business classes. I don't think it was as focused of a business class as I should have probably had. Mostly it just kind of covered like, oh, what you can use your illustrations for, you know, as far as books or magazines. But it was a lot of this was right before everything became digital. And now, like, I went and I spoke at BYU to an illustration class, and they, you know, they're all on iPads now, and they all have like Procreate, and it's amazing. And I'm so jealous because I had to learn all of that on my own, and also, you know, through, you know, I took some classes at, you know, community colleges to learn Adobe, you know, software and creative software. So I wish I had that. That is what I wish I had had, because it is hard to learn those things on your own. But now I know them really well.
Nice.
Learn curve.
So you're saying that I'm because I don't know. Like I said, I'm generally just a layman about all these things, but I'd imagine that a lot of aspiring artists might think that a college class, college degree, or whatever in illustration or art might not have a lot of value if you just have good ideas. But you're saying there is value in learning the tools and learning like what works, and how to create those things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I needed to go to school to become the best artist I could be, because I don't think I could have pushed myself on my own. And I think that I definitely have met artists who are incredibly self-driven in that way. I feel like I'm self-driven now, but I have had that background, right? So I'm like able to push myself in certain ways now. But as far as skill set, I really felt like a college degree was really, really valuable for me. And I feel like, isn't there there's a quote, maybe it's not even a quote, but I think Picasso said something like, you need to learn the rules in order to break them. And I feel like that is definitely a valid thing as far as art goes,
Right.
because he was an excellent painter, a realist painter, and then he just started doing his own thing, and people responded to it because it had this context, like there was something about his paintings, you're like, and then later you find out he actually can paint a person normally. And,
Right.
but
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Okay, a couple more questions then about your business. So you said you're opening a store, like a brick and mortar. What
Yeah.
what was the impetus behind that? What made you consider that necessary?
So, quite honestly, I needed a space for a lot of my products, because I have a studio here in my house, and it was just full of my stuff, my product, and it was getting crazy. So that's one thing. I needed a spot where I could, store my products and, show, almost have like a showroom type thing, and also have a fulfillment area where I could package orders, where my employees could package orders. So that was a big thing, because I had gotten to a point in my business. So I had an assistant, Carrie Jo, and she's amazing. She's now my wholesale manager. That's another part of my business. I don't think I've touched on. But anyway, so that's another way I make money. There is, I needed to have like a way to kind of grow, and move some of the, busy work from my plate and give it to someone else. And so that was part of it. I also have been thinking about a store for probably like 5 years. I've just always, maybe even longer, I've always wanted to have a store, but I just never felt like it was the right time, or I hadn't been making, the money that I'm now making, and feel like it was sustainable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. When is the date that you're opening?
October 14th is
So
when.
that
October
sounds
14th.
like a really good piece of advice, by the way, for an aspiring entrepreneur is don't go out and open a store before you're able to sustain the thing.
Yes, please be aware of that, I guess. But who knows, like, we'll see how this one does.
Well,
know,
I mean, even now, in any time you do something like this, you're inviting or rather accepting a significant risk. But I mean, just talking to you, the way that you talk about it, you've indicated that you didn't blindly jump into that. this was a risk that you thought about, took calculated consideration for,
Mhm.
and have, you know, kind of, tailored your approach based around that risk,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is a good thing for an entrepreneur to do. I would suggest it's a good thing all the aspiring entrepreneurs are listening to this podcast so they can get that knowledge.
Well, I do think if you had talked to me, like I started, I don't know, 11 years ago, if I had opened a store then, I think it would have been closed by now. I mean, I don't think I was ready then. I feel ready now. And I feel like, again, a lot of the stuff I've learned over the years has gotten me to this point. I have had lots of, you know, I've managed people, I've been managed, and, I have liked certain managers, I've disliked certain managers, I've liked certain companies, I've disliked certain companies. So I hopefully am building a company that is what I want, knock on wood, and how I like, how I just want to, anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I do feel that I am ready to do so.
Nice. Good. Okay. I think two more questions, Michelle. Your team. So you have employees. You've already mentioned that, and so maybe you want to speak to that as well. But just what is do you have people that you normally collaborate with? Do you have
Mhm.
what are your business relationships, and what are, I guess, what's the most important part in that collaboration?
So I have worked with a lot of different people over the years. When I started manufacturing my clothing, so it was, I worked with this one company that basically had all of these uh, clothing items they had pre-made, or not pre-made, but they designed it. They had like dresses and, tote bags, and they had like a onesie jumpsuit thing, and they had hats and shorts and button-up blouses, and you could actually take your textile print, send it to them, and then they would make that piece with your pattern on it. And so it was really fun, and they actually you could actually just get one piece made, for a little bit higher of a price, but it was a fun way for me to just experiment with my illustrations and my illustrated patterns. So I started doing that, and that's my illustrated clothing started kind of taking off. This was back in when I was living in London, and when I got back from London and living in Philly. So anyway, I kind of had a problem with not really knowing how my clothing was being made, not using, sustainable fabrics. Just, I was really did not have any clue as to this company, and so I worked with them for a while, and then I realized, so they would work with a lot of other artists as well, but it turns out I was supposed to be getting royalties for like 3 years, and they hadn't been paying any of their artists, and they paid me like $300. Basically, they were like stealing my designs and selling them on the side.
Oh
Um,
my.
and so they did this to a lot of different artists, and it was very bad practice, obviously, but a big learning experience for me. um they so anyway, so it made me really want to find a trustworthy vendor, and a factory, and also be really um aware of how my product is being made, and being really aware, just very involved in that process. And so I work with a lot of I'm sorry, this is so long, I'm not trying to like
No, this is great.
but anyway, so I I started researching different vendors, but I wanted to do small batch because I'm very aware of how fashion is so wasteful. It's it's probably number one of the worst like industries as far as waste goes. Because there's a lot of fast fashion out there. People go through clothing, it's all made from polyester and like just really, really crappy quality. So anyway, so I found this wonderful lady. Her name's Melanie DeSalvo. She has her own company, and she basically helps facilitate the manufacturing of your brand through her factory in India, in Jaipur. And she has worked with this factory to minimize waste. They use azo free inks, which is, chemical free inks. And it's just a lovely factory that she has been, working with closely for years. She used to work for like Walmart and some bigger companies, and she just like got so sick of the waste and the processes that they went through to make things. So anyway, she makes my jumpsuits. She makes and I'm doing a bunch of new stuff with her this coming year. But again, my stuff is very small batch. I also work with a company in India that do ceramics. I work with a wonderful lady, Natsuko, who she, facilitates manufacturing within China. Again, all of my stuff is small batch and as sustainable as possible. And as sustainable meaning locally sourced, also as 100% cotton, stuff that isn't fake or plastic, or or I use a lot of recycled materials as well. So it is important to, I would say, just try to build a good, trustworthy relationship with the people that you are making your stuff, and it's hard to know if they are trustworthy or not, but I think you can kind of feel it from the beginning.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah, that's sounds like quite you've had international experience throughout your life. It sounds like this process of finding good business partners or vendors or whatever they might be. It takes, I mean, you sounds like you are all around the world, and that could probably be daunting for some people. I guess probably less daunting for you.
Well, I was thinking about I feel like my experiences abroad have made me less afraid of being branching out internationally. I do talk to a lot of artists here locally in Salt Lake who are like, oh yeah, like I don't ship internationally, that is too much bother, or that I don't know how that works, or and there is a learning curve when it comes to international shipping and also traveling, but I have had a lot of experience traveling, and so I'm not afraid of that.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So that's another entrepreneurial tip. Travel internationally, preferably with one-way tickets.
One way and no way back.
This is not an actual entrepreneurial ship.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Last thing then, Michelle. So we've got we've got kids listen to us in college and some coming just out of college. If you were looking at yourself, 15 years ago or whatever, and what would be your main pieces of advice? What are the main things that you'd advise, your aspiring entrepreneur, artist, designer to think about and do?
I would say take risks. I would say try many things as you can when it comes to like your art. You know, if you are interested in ceramics, if you're interested in screen printing, if you're interested in, you know, if you're interested in a lot of things, just do it all. And you know, you've got time. Don't be afraid to mess up. Do a lot of internships. And let's see. I would, yeah, I mean, just try to learn and just know that you'll get where you want to be. And don't worry, I would say. Don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. like you know, like you just feel like a deer in the headlights. You're like, what do I do now? But I think it's very, you know, you're going to be okay. You're going to listen to yourself. I would say listen to your gut, you know, and just follow the intuition, because everyone has it.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. This has been great. So once again, My Little Belleville. So if they want to online, you've got your own website, Etsy store, all of that kind of stuff. But if they live in Utah or, you know, any of the neighboring states, they can come down to your opening. So October 14th, I guess if there's any changes to that, we can give any updates on the podcast website. But October 14th, across from, wait, where did you say it was?
Across from Rodizio Grill in Trolley Square. It's upstairs across from Rodizio Grill.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Website as well. So you don't have to, you know, I'm online as well. So mylittlebelleville.com.
Littlebelleville.com. Awesome. Well, check it out. And Michelle, thank you. It's been great. We don't, our forte generally on the podcast has been physics and calculus and, you know, the more boring side of human existence. So this has been a nice change.
Talking about ophthalmology recently.
Oh, I was you did just talk about ophthalmology.
Yes. We may have had other relations of yours, Michelle.
Yes.
We've got
my brother.
Brother, your dad. Yeah, exactly. So we've got to get the whole family on here.
You're the interesting ones.
Anyway,
it's fun to talk about it and to, you know, I think also just reflect on it. I don't think I do that much, but it's nice to just and I don't know if I have any advice, but I do really feel like I've had a lot of artists in my life that have helped me through, you know, the hard parts and have taught me so much. So I'm grateful to them. So
yeah. Well, that's great, and I appreciate you and your experience, and I hope the brick and mortar store goes super well. And yeah, I'm really grateful that you're able to come on and share the insight with us. So we'll sign off now, and we'll be back again next podcast.
All right.